Woohoo! We're going to talk about ethnography today. So excited. This is one of the foundational methods of communication and qualitative research. Ethnography is both an art and a science. At its core, it's about describing and interpreting culture. That's really cool. And how people make sense of their world, their routines, and their relationships. Great method. Think of ethnography as an invitation to walk alongside a community. Unlike surveys or experiments, which often reduce behavior to variables, ethnography immerses the researcher in a lived experience. It means sitting in the kitchen with somebody, attending ceremonies, listening to jokes, and paying attention to the things that aren't said, to the silences that are there. But ethnography is not just about being there or being present with another group. It's also about writing culture. The ethnographer becomes both scientist and storyteller, and is tasked with rendering the insider's perspective, which is called the emic view, versus the outsider's perspective, which is the etic view. These are two cultural terms. So in a culture's inside perspective is the emic, but if you look on it and explain it from the outside perspective, it's called etic. Okay. So in the next few minutes, we're going to talk about three things. Number one, the pitfalls and promises of ethnography. I think there's a reading, 10 Lies of Ethnography. So we're going to use that to kind of start off our discussion. The second thing we'll talk about is the guide, the practical guide for doing ethnography, and kind of give you a summary of that and maybe talk about it a little bit. And the third thing that we're going to be doing is we'll talk about the example of speaking like a man in Teamsterville. This is it is one of the most seminal articles on ethnography that's out there. And it's really interesting, okay? So, part one, the 10 lies of ethnography. Okay, lie number one. Well, let me go back a little bit. In the essay, 10 Lies of Ethnography, it outlines some of the common misconceptions that derail researchers when they try to do ethnography, okay? He calls them lies, but they're really not lies. They're just deliberate, they're not deliberate falsehoods either, but they're assumptions, sometimes seductive assumptions that ethnographers also often tell themselves in where they make mistakes. So we're going to walk through these first, and then we'll go to the next section, which is how to do ethnography. Okay. Lie number one, ethnography is objective. Okay. In reality, there's no such thing as an objective ethnographer. There's no ethnographer. Ethnographer is not a machine, a neutral machine. Okay. We all bring biases, theories, and identities into our field, where we do our field work. Pretending otherwise undermines the credibility of our work. Instead, good ethnographers acknowledge positionality and reflexivity. Line number two, the ethnographer can be invisible. Sometimes researchers imagine that we can just blend in, but our presence always shapes the interaction. It's called the Hawthorne effect on the quantitative side, but it's the same principle here in qualitative. People act differently when they know they're being observed. The task isn't just to disappear, but to account for how our presence influences what we see and the people around us. Okay. Lie number three, culture speaks for itself. Data never simply speaks. The ethnographer interprets, selects, and frames. Without careful analysis, transcripts and field notes remain lifeless. Meaning making is the core responsibility of the researcher. Line number four, one study captures the whole culture. When you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, but a lot of people think that. Cultures are vast and multi-layered. A single ethnography always offers a slice of what that culture looks like. It's a perspective, it's a partial truth. Overclaiming universality is misleading, and good ethnography is humble in scope. Lie number five, long-term presence creates or ensures validity. Spending years in the field does not automatically give you better insights. If research is attentive or inattentive or biased, time only deepens the problem. Quality depends on rigor, reflexivity, and triangulation, rather than sheer duration of the time you spent with a group of people. Lie number 6, ethnography is easy. It's just hanging out. Ethnographic immersion might look like being with people, but it requires discipline, systematic note-taking, coding, analysis, ethical decision-making. It's labor-intensive and it's often emotionally draining. In class, I'll give you some examples of some fun ones, some that sound like you're just hanging out, but there are some pitfalls there. And so I'll try to remember to bring some of those examples into class. Okay. Lie number 7, ethnographers should avoid theory. Nope. Some people believe that ethnography should be purely descriptive, but the truth of it is that theory guides what we notice, what we interpret, and how we write. So ethnography without theory risks becoming, it's just a travel log, just a description of what we see. There's no real value to it. Okay. Lie number 8, the ethnographer can capture reality exactly like it is. So ethnography is a representation. It's filtered through the researcher's lens. We talked about the cognitive schema there. It's shaped by that person's writing style and it's limited by time. What we produce is always an interpretation, not a mirror of what reality is. Okay, lie number 9, ethnography speaks only to insiders. While we honor the voice of participants, ethnographies are written for multiple audiences, fellow scholars, policymakers, and sometimes the community itself. That means balancing fidelity to the emic perspective with accessibility for others for the etic perspective. And ethnographers have got in trouble with this. Sometimes they go to emic, and sometimes they go to etic. Does that make sense? So, an example of this, I read an article from a young lady, or about a young lady. I think she was doing her doctoral dissertation in anthropology or something. Anyway, she lived with a group of people, I think it was on the East Coast. It was a small community, and she lived with them for a year. And when she actually wrote her thesis and made it into a book, she gave it was too etic. So it was from an outsider perspective, and the community read the book or became aware of it and like, what the heck? That's not us. That's not how we think, because it was too much from the etic side. Now the same thing can happen on the other end too, where you give too much of an emic perspective, where it's just the perspective of the people without an overarching narrative or explanation of what's going on. If you've read Speaking Like a Man in Teamsterville, you'll see how those two things, the emic and the etic perspectives, really come together well. Okay. All right, last lie. I'll shut up. Ethnography ends when you leave the field. The story doesn't stop when the researcher packs up and goes home. The writing, the analysis, and the relationships with the participants can continue long after the field work ends. Some communities expect feedback, collaboration, even advocacy from the ethnographer. So together, these 10 lies remind us that ethnography isn't just a mechanical process, but a human interpretive craft. Recognizing the pitfalls that you can run into or assume is the first step to doing a better ethnography. Okay, part 2. How to do an ethnography. And this is from the practical guide that I asked you guys to read. So, if ethnography isn't just being there, how do we do it well? In that manual about how to do an ethnography, it lays out a series of steps and guiding principles. So let's talk about each of these and make a roadmap for doing, or recipe, we talked about that, for doing good ethnography. Okay. Number 1, choose the problem or theoretical frame for that problem. Okay. So ethnography starts with curiosity, but it requires clarity. What problem are you exploring? What theory or model will guide your observations? For example, if you're studying something, why a certain group of people are doing something, maybe uses and gratifications might help guide your ethnographic observations. Okay. Number 2, you enter the field. Access is often negotiated, it's not granted. There's guiding principles that require trust building, respect for local gatekeepers, and sometimes even formal permissions. Ethnographers must be patient. The field is not a laboratory waiting for us, but it's a living community with its own rhythms. I think I talked about in class the time I spent in the old folks community on the quilting circle with the old ladies. And it took quite some time for me to become part of that community. I did it for a whole semester. Went 2-3 times a week. And by the end, I probably told you guys this. I was the bingo caller for the group, and I don't know, it was kind of fun, but it didn't happen all at once. Okay, we had to get permission to go. We had to make our contacts. We had to build respect and trust with the people who live there. Okay, number 3, third step for doing a really good ethnography is called participant observation. Now, in ethnography, there's 2 things. There's a participant and there's an observer. We can be a participant primarily and then observe. We can observe and participate, or we can just participate or be an observer. So there's 4 different levels, I guess you could say. But at the heart of all of it, we observe while we participate. And like I said, the balance varies. Sometimes you're mostly a listener, sometimes you're a helper, sometimes you're a confidant. The key is systematic documentation, field notes, thick description, attention to both routine and anomaly. Number 4, interviews and conversations. Ethnography often blends observations with interviews. Unlike surveys, these are open-ended, conversational, responsive, and a good ethnographer uses probes. Can you give me an example? Or what does that mean to you? And you get people talking. That's the key here. Now, the same thing is with interview technique too, but you want to build relationships as an ethnographer and get people to open up and be genuine with you. Okay. Next is 5, recording your data. Notes are your lifeline. Clifford Geertz, he's the one who offered this, the phrase thick description. It's not just what people do, it's the layered meanings behind what they do. So always record who was present, what was said in the surrounding context. Okay, number 6, ethics. Ethnography often deals with intimate, sensitive settings. Informed consent is crucial, but so is protecting confidentiality, honoring community norms, and avoiding exploitation. Respect for persons, beneficence, and justice remain guiding principles. And if you've done your city training, you know what those 3 terms mean. Okay. 7, analysis. Contrary to the myth, analysis doesn't wait until the end. Ethnographers analyze as they go, noticing patterns, generating hypotheses, checking them against future observations, and later coding and thematic analysis help structure the massive data that you've got into categories. And then you build, like the Legos, we just build them up from there. Okay. The last thing that we'll do with ethnography is write it up. The ethnographer has to transform all their notes, recordings, everything into a narrative. And writing isn't just about representing. Style matters. Use of quotations, storytelling, voice determine how readers engage. Ideally, the ethnography should ring true both to academic peers in the community study. So that's what I was saying about earlier. The IMIC and the EDIC perspective has to match together. So you may notice that ethnography is cyclical. It's not linear. We enter, we observe, we write, we return, and sometimes we do that multiple times. Okay. All right, part 3, an example, speaking like a man in Teamsterville. We're going to turn to this classic study of ethnography by Gary Phillipson. The setting. Phillipson studied a working class Chicago neighborhood in the 1960s. He named made a pseudonym, and he called it Teamsterville. This was a blue-collar, male-dominated culture marked by strong identities and labor union ties. The focus. Rather than surveying communication patterns, Phillipson immersed himself in the rhythms of the neighborhood. He wanted to understand how local men thought about talk. When was speech appropriate? When was it avoided? And what it meant to speak like a man. He found that a striking pattern. In Teamsterville, real men did not talk very much. Speech was not a primary means of influence. Instead, authority rested on physical strength, social position, and institutional power. For example, a man might say, if I want to influence my kid, I don't talk to him, I just hit him. Or if I want to influence my wife, I don't talk to her, I'll have my brother go talk to her. In this community, speech was viewed as secondary to action, hierarchy, and social networks of power. Talk was reserved for equals in settings like bars, and it was avoided with women bosses or children. What Phillipson contributed to the discussion here about speaking, what it means to speak, right? His work became the foundational development for speech codes theory. It demonstrated that cultural norms and communication norms are both culturally grounded, and they're not universal. What counts as persuasive, appropriate, masculine, feminine, whatever, speech varies by community. Now, why all this matters? Imagine trying to apply mainstream communication theories like communication is the primary tool for influence to Teamsterville. Those theories would fail. Phillipson's ethnography revealed how culture shapes communication in ways that outsiders may not ever suspect. So there's real power in ethnography. It uncovers hidden logics, shows the taking for granted, and challenges our assumptions about human interaction. All right, to wrap it up. 1, ethnography is immersive research. It's rooted in participant observation with thick description. 2, the 10 lies of ethnography reminds us that ethnography is not neutral, easy, or total, right? It's interpretive, partial, and deeply human. 3, doing ethnography requires method and ethics. Entering the field carefully, observing and listening systematically, and analytically, writing responsibly, all that sort of stuff. And last, Phillipson speaking like a man in Teamsterville exemplifies how this is done really well. It shows how a researcher can reveal the cultural ties of communication that structure everyday life. So, taken together, these lessons remind us that ethnography isn't simply about studying others. It's about cultivating humility, reflexivity, and attentiveness in the ways that people creating meaning, to the ways that people create meaning to their worlds. Okay, we went a little bit long. I think we're gonna have 15 minutes or so, but we'll cut it off here, and I'll send you to do the learning checks, and then we'll see you in class. Thanks.